Okay, so you see how the fuel tank is in the way? I can't get that all the way out. I was just going to do this other side, say do it like the other side, but that's in the way. So what I'm going to have to do is I'm going to have to loosen these two in the front and this in the back. They are also 17. Okay, everybody. So obviously now that the tension's off this bolt, it's easy to unscrew by hand. I may just go end up tanking these out on the other side as well. I did lower it down where I could reach it better, but I mean, these really weren't so bad to break, not as bad as I thought they would be. And with this whole piece out of the way, I suspect my life's going to be a lot easier. Okay, I didn't hear it pop out as aggressively as the other side, so I didn't think it was out, but it is. So hooray, we win. I guess that's a solution for you guys. You don't even need to rent the race. Your bearing kit should do it all on its own. So what I'm doing here is I'm taking a piece of paper and I'm marking 11/16, which is going to be about 0.67 to 0.7 inches. I can't remember the millimeters off the top of my head, but I do not have my calipers to measure how much the bushing protrudes from the trailing arm on the inside. It's supposed to be about, 11/16, 0.67 to 0.7 inches. So what I'm doing, I'm going to make this, and because the paper is square on the edge, I can fold it at the line and make sure that it doesn't distort as it goes down the edge. Once I get a nice line by folding, I'm going to cut it with the knife, and then I'm going to just wrap this around the edge of the bearing as it sticks out, and if it's not sticking out enough, I'll push it through a little bit more, and if it's sticking out too much, then I'll push it back. So that's pretty much what I'm doing to make sure I get the inside measurement of the bearing proper. So an oversight that I noticed is the OEM has a small little kind of divot on its edges so you can help seat it easier. Once it's in a little bit, you can push it in and it stays even, whereas this one is perfectly square. So unfortunately it's hard to get in to go straight, and you can see that by the scarring in the paint. I just can't get it to sit straight when I'm trying to slip it in. So the edge of this is pretty fat. If I take a lip down a little bit, I'll be all right. I just need it to get enough in to where it will sit evenly as I'm pushing it in, so that way I can continue pushing it all the way in, and that way it's not crooked when it's finally sitting in its last moments. So I'm a little disappointed that that feature is kind of overlooked. I'm gonna have to tape this off because I obviously do not want metal filings in there. I will not be happy. I eyeballed this last time and actually got it almost right on for how much I could go in, but I'm not gonna go past this line, because past this piece of paper, if you've seen earlier in the video, was the part that's gonna sit inside the trailing arm. So I obviously don't want to lower that because I want it to be a nice tight fit. Though honestly, this thing's so freaking fat. When I pushed it in, if I included it in the video, a piece of metal and paint had been filed off by the pressing of it in. It's just a little bit too tight, which is probably better than too loose, but it's frustrating. So now that I have that, I'm going to grind it, and I'm going to use the Dremel, slightly finer grind, to take off any burrs. So I put a small divot on that edge, just kind of went down with brushing motions. With the angle grinder, put that small dip, and then I'm going to take my Dremel and smooth up those rough edges and take those burrs off. Then I'm just going to rinse this with some water, so that way when I take off the tape, no filings get inside. So this setup right here seems to be the most effective so far. Back it with about 450 foot-pounds from an impact wrench, and we're kind of doing it. So let's try to finish it. You see a little bit of paint or something came off. Maybe even a little, yeah, it's a little bit of metal. The clearance is just a little bit tighter than factory, and so it just doesn't quite work. It's in, so now I'm going to back it back out, try to straighten it back out. I put it in a little bit further, so that way I could push it back and try to straighten it. It's not supposed to be one way or the other. If it's not sitting evenly, if it's more to one side or the other, then it's obviously a problem. So, just to show you guys, this is from the kit, a ball joint kit, press kit. You can get one. It's one of the larger kits. They're all pretty much the same. I use this on the back side here. I use this on the front, and this piece right here, this flat surface, will fit the face of this piece just fine. And then right here, a bucket for it to go into. So let me go ahead and change it around and see if I can't get it to sit where it's supposed to. If you have one of these tools, different people use different things. I'm being a goober right now. Okay. Different people use different things to lubricate this. I just use there's a brake. It's like Teflon and some synthetic grease and some other stuff that I use, and I put it, even though it's not factory recommended, I put it on buddy, trying to balance. Yeah, yay. So I'm just gonna pull on it, try to hold up that other side while I hold this in, try to twist so I can get it to clamp down and hold itself. But yeah, so I use a synthetic brake grease on the sliding metal components for like my calipers and stuff. It's not recommended, and some people caution because, you know, obviously if you get it on the pads or the discs, that's an issue, but it's nice because it doesn't wash out real easy and it handles high temperatures, which would be better if my brakes were performance brakes. So I researched it pretty thoroughly. It's great for not washing out. So on the threads of this thing, I put that grease on there because it makes my hands a little dirty every now and then, but this thing slides a lot better for it, and it's not silicone and it's going to build up gooey garbage in it, and silicone's good for other stuff like plastics. But or rubbers if you got your sliders and you don't need like some high heat copper stuff. And if you do, while we're talking about it, just ask and I'll post something I found from 3M. But anyways, so making sure this sucker's lined up properly, and we're gonna just push it back a little. Alrighty, so we have 5/16 for this outside lip, approximately, not quite perfect. I made a little piece of paper to wrap around it. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go ahead, wrap it around this piece, mark it with my oil-based pin, push it up to the oil mark, and then I'll take this off so I'm not double checking like 20 million times. let's double check it. I think we may have got it. It may have popped last second to where it needs to go. Yeah, there's still a little bit of yellow showing, I know. But part of that is because it kind of bled through. So I kind of knew where it broke because it was thicker in some sections. The bottom looks good, from my side at least. And it looks a little too much that way by like the tiniest little bit. Probably not enough to be off spec. The real question is, what does it look like on the other side, the inside? Okay, this is concerning. This definitely looks like it's too far in. So what we're going to do is I'm going to take this off. We're going to check, make sure the outside, that other side looks like it's supposed to be. If it's too much, we got to figure out how to push only this side back, but not that side. Yay. So it's somewhat decent on this side. Let's check this other side. Alright guys, I think that's as good as it gets, truthfully. There's a divot right here so it can lie to me on this side when I'm measuring flush with this. And this side, right about here, it seems like it's in a little bit too much. Right about here, it seems like it's out a little bit too much. But again, this isn't a race car. It's not like the craziest, best performance suspension ever. So we're just gonna roll with it. It's still good. I'm sure it'll work great. I'm just a perfectionist and just a little cheesed about how much grief this thing's giving me. I'm not really worried about paint getting on this trailing arm and not being properly cleaned and prepped. If it flakes off because there's a little bit of dirt, that's okay. My arm's still painted. Some of you guys might have some rusted arms. I'd recommend y'all clean them and then recoat them if that's the case. But I just really am more concerned about hitting this. So if there's a little bit of overspray onto the trailing arm and around it, it's okay if it falls off because it's got paint underneath. I'm just worried about this area. And so, and it's pretty much already exposed from me grinding it down to make that lip so I could press it in. And then obviously I don't want paint getting on the inside. So I'm going to use a zinc primer and then I'm going to put just some black paint on top of it. All right. Maybe you can hear it. This piece has a little bit of play after I pressed it in. It may have warped it a little bit, cracking this seal. So I'm not really sure what sort of glue they used or if it was just pressed in and it's supposed to have a better seal. If the whole bushing is warped, then I wonder how long it's really going to last. But I mean, you can even see under this paint right here, there's a little metal filing that came from this piece just from being pushed in. I mean, it literally shaved metal off when I pushed them in. They're just a bit too tight. So I'm hoping this bushing doesn't fail on me later, and I'm really stressing any dirt or water getting in. And since this part doesn't really stretch, but this part does, not this part right here where this little black tab is, this part right here stretches, this doesn't. So I'm wondering if I shouldn't just try to get something to seal it. Ideally a polyurethane that I could just goop on there would last, you know, a good 10-20 years, about as long as the bushings. And probably bond real well. A glue would probably be more brittle. JB Weld would probably be pretty strong, but I worry, would it still just kind of crack away and let stuff in, or would it just do a decent job in keeping it sealed? So again, I don't like modifying things. This has been a really frustrating project for me, and this is one of the reasons why. It shouldn't have to be rocket science to push in a bushing. This is not a new concept for me. All right. So the other side of the car we're gonna lower the jack, and this piece is gonna go back up into this bracket. But on this side, if you remember, I can't get this bolt in without removing the bracket. So what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna do this side for the video. The other side's pretty straightforward. Make sure you're facing this the right way, because obviously this goes to a certain side. And if you don't remember which side the bolt goes to, it points to the outside. So point it out. And something you need to remember to do is you need to get a new nut. These old nuts are, well, they're old. They might still work, but it's recommended by the manufacturer to change them. So rather than take our chances, we're going to replace it like the manufacturer recommends. Now, I can tighten this here, or I can wait until I have it up, whichever one's easier. I like the idea of it sitting still a little more, so I can still get this. I can still get a socket in there to, or I can get a wrench in there, and then I can hit a socket on this side to tighten it to spec. So I'm not super worried. What I'm gonna do is I'm gonna start grabbing these other bolts. I'm gonna start threading them by hand, and then eventually I'm gonna just start taking a socket to them. Now I've pretty much taken all the pressure off of this piece, but it's still being a bit of a bear. And I think part of that is because I need to get this back in the other side, because I don't think it's sitting even and it's pushing against stuff. So I'm gonna put this in on the other side, and I'm gonna get back to trying to push this up. I took all the weight off of this, so this is still being held up by the lateral link and the shock. So I'm not worried about it falling on my head at this point. But I do like having that jack under it so I can manipulate it, but I might have to bring the jack over just to push this up. We'll find out in a second. All right. I could really use someone bench pressing this trailing end. Well, I try to screw this in, that'd be great. So I could take some more off the tension beam. It could be still pushing back while I'm trying to lift this. Let's go do that. Let's see if we can lower it just a little bit more. I have it pretty much all the way down, so. Yeah, that was a teeny bit, guys, and that might make my life easier, just that teeny little bit, because I need to get these guys to just grab. Once they grab, it'll be less work. All right, we're taking a rest. All right. Hey. Get that all back in. Just a nice rotating back and forth. And even though I don't know of anything that specifies it, if you don't know what direction you should always bolt and unbolt from, when you're unbolting, start on the outside and work your way in. And when you're bolting, start on the inside and work your way out. Helps prevent warp of pieces. So in this case, when I start torquing all these, I'm going to kind of do, it's really only 4 bolts. So it's going to be a really sad star pattern, but it's going to be kind of a star. I'm going to be rotating between them. So let me get the torque specs for you guys in my torque wrench. All right, folks, I pulled one of the bolts back out and I measured it, and it is 10 millimeters, so it's an M10. And this grade right here, you may or may not be able to see it, but it's either a 6 or a 9, and you know how that goes with 6 and 9s when you flip them upside down. Now it has a dot right below it when it's reading as a 6, so it could be grade 6. Identifying bolts is not really my talent. I'm not sure if it's standardized across the industry for grades, or if it's or if Nissan has their own system. So if it's a 6, I can't tighten it too much because I don't want to stretch these threads. If it's a 9, it can go up to as high as like 50 something foot-pounds, and a similar bolt that I found on the other side of the car can go to is said to go to about 33, holding a kind of a similar bracket. So obviously you don't want to do something too loose and have it fall out. If you do something too tight, you'll never get it free, or you'll break something. So it's very important to me that I find the right torque spec. So what's really interesting is I was able to find 2 different 7 bolts and the dots above it, which would lead me to believe this 9 is not a 6 because it's got a dot above it. And the documentation on this car shows bolts of increments of 4, 7, and 9, giving torque specs for them. So this puts us around 50 something. It gives a high and a low, so obviously I'd want to hit the in-between point, and that would be the torque spec I can more safely assume now for this, and it makes a lot more sense than 30 something, especially for the size of the bolt and how serious of a section this is. So unfortunately, bolts just aren't my specialty. In this car, I've gone over some other bolts and they look like they're using some American standard numbering system, so I'm not really sure. The consistency on this car just kind of blows me away when it comes to identifying bolt strength, and that's one of the reasons why I just don't like messing with bolt strength. I go factory, even though they kind of overprice their nuts and bolts, just because they make it so hard to figure out what's what. And maybe some of you guys are more confident in that and more competent, and maybe you have more knowledge on that than I do. And if you do, more power to you. This is my deficit, and I'm willing to recognize that if it means playing it safe. So so the torque spec I'm going to give you is at your own risk, but I did pull it from a Nissan all data sheet. Okay, so if this is in fact a grade 9 M10, we're going off of Nissan data that I was able to pull, then this is between 51 and 54, so I usually just take the difference between the two numbers, divide it in half, and that's what I torque it to. So we're going to torque it to 52.5, and I'm going to try to do it with a little bit shorter reach, that way I don't have a giant bar affecting what I'm actually torquing it to. And it's 52.5. One. Like I said, I'm particular because safety's involved, and this is the best I could do. And usually I make sure I have all my torque specs before I start a project, and of course I didn't. And I realized I couldn't find it. Didn't originally plan to take this part down, so obviously that is what contributed to making a new issue for me. There we go. Some people like to click it a lot. That's really just hard on your wrench. It's unnecessary. If you do want to go back and just check some of the first bolts you did, that's not a bad idea, because on the off chance it somehow got looser, you can tighten it a little bit, but I think you'll be fine. And it's always a little frustrating when there's not enough clicks. Click. Click. Oh man, when is this thing gonna do it? Alright guys, I'm gonna use the extension on this one because I just don't have the range of motion I need. There we go. I guess it was ready to go the whole time, huh? Alright, I'm going to go back to the smaller one and just check them just because I'm crazy. Okay, so this one's going to be 83 to 95, 83, 7, 5, 12. That difference is 12 divided by 2 is 6 plus 3 is 89. So I'm going to tighten it to 89. And the other one's almost about right where it is. So if I don't show you on video, it's just I'm trying not to bore you. Thought there was a little bit of tension that was keeping it from spinning, but I guess I was mistaken. There we have it. Now I'm gonna do the other side. Okay, let's not forget that we need to put these guys back. I don't know why I was thinking it was a hydraulic line. It's clearly an e-brake. So, now, even though I'm big on torque specs, this guy is, I think, like 5 inch-pounds maybe. I mean, 40 inch-pounds is the turn of the wrist. So this is a very light, you know, squish it together, make it hold sort of thing. So don't go crazy. Just hand tighten it. It'll be fine. This is one you don't need to go out and buy a little. I wouldn't stress over this one. I stress out about a lot of specs where people don't, just because I'm particular. I don't do this on a daily basis, so I'd rather just play it safe. Professional mechanic who's been doing it for 30 years, I'd trust him if he did it by hand. A goober nut who thinks he's amazing and decides, well, I'm just gonna do it by feel. No, I'm not gonna trust that guy. If he's been doing it with a torque wrench for 30 years, I'm gonna trust him if he decides to do it by hand once. That said, if he's in my engine or my transmission or something really critical, doesn't matter. I want him to bust out a torque wrench. So that's secure. I'm gonna do the other side. Then we'll go to the lateral link.